and welcome to this Eerie Extra of Such a Nightmare Conversations About Horror. Eerie Extras are the places where we do all the things we can't fit in anywhere else, and today's Eerie Extra is somewhere between an Eerie Extra and a spooktacular, because we're doing a fast response reaction to a very new film, Halloween Kills 2021. I am Katherine Troyer. I am delighted, as always, to be joined by the one and only Anthony Tresca, but the one and only Anthony Tresca who is already going to be making me really sad about your feelings about Halloween Kills.
Yep, it's that time of year again where you force me to watch a Halloween movie and I hate it. It's become our yearly Halloween tradition.
It has, and it started to extend over to, it's not even just the Halloween franchise anymore. I tried to get you to watch a beloved Halloween film of my childhood, and you were like, so boring, and I was like, stop it. So apparently, Halloween-themed films and my preferences and your preferences are definitely not in alignment.
Yeah, I guess not. Because this film does definitely continue that trend, at least for me, of diminishing returns, at least for me returning back to the Halloween franchise, because I feel like I obviously started from a place of not enjoying the original 1978 film. And for more on that and our discussion on that, go back and listen to our spooktacular episode on that from a couple years ago. And I thought I didn't like that Halloween movie. But then I saw 2018's Halloween, and then I was like, wait a second. Maybe the original actually had some merit, because this is terrible. But now that I have seen Halloween Kills, it just makes me long for Halloween 2018, when we at least had some ideas and a screenplay and coherency in what was going on. So I long for the simpler times of 2018, when I thought Halloween 2018 was the worst we could get.
And now that we've alienated 90% of our listeners, I thought it was actually really interesting that you texted me and said that part of you, the masochistic part of you, wanted to go back and watch the 78 because you were pretty sure you were going to have a new appreciation for the film.
I think so. Oh yeah, because I think where this film just kind of lost me was in its it's not a new approach to Michael Myers, but it's this forcing him to kind of reset and just become this unstoppable. They're really leaning into the unstoppable force of nature aspect that John Carpenter himself has identified as being the most interesting part of Michael Myers.
Yes.
That's not the most interesting part of what I think Michael Myers is, but that's what these writers... Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think, and I've mentioned this before in prior episodes about other slasher films, but I think that our desire that often manifests in sequels or in remakes to create a context for the boogeyman, and whether or not that's creating a really elaborate backstory, or in this case, almost stripping us of the backstory and saying he's not really even a human, so it really doesn't matter what was wrong with him as a child. He's just the boogeyman, right? I find that either of those approaches sort of ruins sometimes the potential for our big bad to be so much more. And I think that by either giving us too much of a background or by stripping us particularly of the sense of humanity, it does remove a lot of the themes that I think are really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting to hear David Gordon Green, who is one of the directors. He helped produce it, and he was one of the 3 credited writers on the project. He talked kind of specifically about how the entire reason that they came back to do this franchise was to get away from that other approach that you mentioned, the 2 types of approaches that you can go with for a horror, specifically slasher sequel. He felt the other films had done way too much work trying to explain Michael Myers' backstory and trying to ground and make this slasher monster sympathetic and kind of ground him in the real world. And so he hated that approach. And so he's specifically, this approach will get him back to that force of nature style Michael Myers from the original, who has no discernible backstory. And that was specifically the intended goal of the creator.
I definitely, if I have to pick between the two, right, this extended backstory that, again, as we've seen with like our discussion of Nightmare on Elm Street, always somehow includes like these traumas of rape or incest, right? Just without fail. Yeah. So I am super happy we're getting away from that. I'm also okay with the idea of somebody just flat out saying, why does this person keep coming back? Because there's something extra, right? I mean, the Nightmare on Elm Street series just leaned into that hard, and it's worked very well for them. I don't think it's worked as well for the Halloween series, in part because it is a little unclear to me if they're saying he is truly extra as in supernatural, extra as in, they just refer to him as the body, right? So like that he transcends. I'm not entirely sure that they've worked out what extra means. And it seems like what was extra at the beginning of the 2018 film is different than what was at the beginning of the 2021 film, but also that what they were doing at the beginning of the 2021 film, Halloween Kills, was different than what's happening at the end of Halloween Kills. So we don't even have a consistency within one given text.
I could not agree more. That was one of my central qualms with the film, is that I think it's a similar problem to what we just saw in Nia DaCosta's new Candyman film. When you do the transcendent horror, it's in right now. I don't think we can. Everyone wants their creature, I guess, in the age of a franchise, to be able to truly transcend, because that means it's not about one particular actor. It's about the character who can be extended on for cash, for the incoming future.
And the slightly less cynical view. It's also because we're finally beginning to acknowledge what, as a culture, what horror creators and horror scholars have known all along, and that is that these can be metaphors for these really big systemic issues.
Yes.
So there is also that, but you're right, that it is something that's very popular right now, and we have to assume that it, just as much as it might be a reflection of cultural zeitgeist, it's also a reflection of money.
Whether I can't imagine that the writers actually sat down and it wasn't about money. It was probably about this. It is a clear trend from horror creators, right on both like the novel side as well as on the film side, of being obsessed with this idea of transcendency. But where the problem comes in is when you then use that idea to just kind of be like, none of this matters. You can just kind of like, our character can now just kind of do whatever. Because previously, Michael Myers had been playing by some kinds of rules. He's better at the game than everybody else, but he is playing by the same set of rules as everybody else. In this movie, he's a god. Sometimes he is a god who can just like vanish and appear, like with that kid. He can definitely just be shot, stabbed, ripped apart, beaten to death by an entire mob, and then just get up. It doesn't even matter. So, which I think when you have that element in there, it just kind of, I don't know there's not really a way to keep the stakes up in a slasher movie, which I think is at the essence of all good slashers. Why you're scared is if you really do believe there is perhaps some chance that they can get away, that something could happen. But when you're dealing with this Transcendence boogeyman who is basically magic at this point and can do whatever he wants, I don't really feel like there ever really was a chance where this could have gone the other way at this point, which is frustrating when you're in this genre.
Yes, there is an inevitability to the film pretty early on, and to be perfectly honest, I think that when you go see these types of slasher films, you are hoping to see sort of impossible feats, right? So I honestly had very little problem with him managing to have survived the house burning down. I had very little problem with him wiping out all the first responders, because even though those were, ridiculously over the top, it was ridiculously over the top within a slasher context. Yeah, but you are correct that, the Laurie, the character of Laurie, makes this line towards the end where she's like, I think the only way we're going to be able to defeat him is if I die and he dies and we kind of like wipe out the balance. And I'm, it'll be sad because she's an interesting character and because I love Jamie Lee Curtis. So it'll be sad if they kill that character, because then they're saying for sure, hopefully for the last time, this is the end of the franchise, until the next time they reboot it. But while I am okay with her dying, I also feel like, again, like you said, they've built such inevitability into it. Like, this is what's going to have to happen. And if she lives, it's going to feel almost like they made it fit when it shouldn't have, right? Like, if she lives, it's going to feel like they have denied us the closure that they promised us. And if she dies, then we've known this really for over a film and a half, because we kind of knew that about the halfway mark of Halloween Kills. And that, you're right, it removes the stakes in ways that are a little disappointing. We've seen this, again, in Candyman, we saw some of that as well.
And, you know, we've also seen this in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, because this is the same plot of, like, ultimate evil versus ultimate good, where Alice is the balancing, they're each other's halves, they're the same thing, which is super duper interesting idea. But in that film, they totally commit to the idea that Freddy Krueger is this magical thing. So you obviously know he is this elevated force, and then in turn they put Alice on that force. In this movie, they're kind of bouncing back and forth between where they put you on the human scale and where they put you on the God scale. And I mean that both for Michael Myers as well as for Laurie to some extent.
Because there's a really interesting narrative thread that happens in the film that they don't resolve problematically so. And that is that, you know, she says it's all about me. He's after me. If I die, then, you know, and she's kind of like elevating herself also to this like level of fate, right? Like Greek and Roman gods level of fate. But then everyone's like, no, actually, it had nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with just his crazy doctor who just said, hey, Michael, I happen to release you nearby. Kill, and let's see what happens. But they don't ever answer which one is correct. And I'm not sure they're going to for this newest, or, you know, for the next film. So I think it's going to be one of those things that it's a little bit of, you know, have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. I think maybe, I don't know. I think maybe I thought that they did kind of answer it. I thought that, at least from my viewing, I thought that they did kind of clearly say Laurie was right. Only she is going to be the one to be able to defeat it, because, and this is my argument, what we are watching is actually, get this, libertarian horror. We've watched this is an entry in libertarian horror that is all about the promotion of the individual, the elevation of the singular self above the rest. Because who is the real villain in this movie? It's not Michael Myers, but it's a chord of people coming together, united and strong, who then have to be killed because there is no power in the group. The only power is in the individual.
That's interesting.
So I would say that what we were watching, and a reason why perhaps it's not surprising that I don't find a ton of excitement and joy in this, is that it's just libertarian kind of horror. This is this is stuff that would scare, that I imagine probably scares libertarians, but it's not super scary, because I'm like, I don't know, I feel like if this group happened, if we're playing by the rules that were established in the original kind of Halloween, and to some extent in the 2018, this mob should kind of be able to defeat Michael Myers by banding together. They are able to make it to where he can't kind of run off on the sides and get out and then be able to pop back up, because they've encountered him. They've blocked him off. But then, and this movie kind of says that should work too for some of it, and it does work until it just doesn't anymore.
That was actually my favorite. The mob mentality part was probably my favorite part of the film. So there are two things I really like, and I've mentioned these before, but I'm always a big fan of what happens after, right? Because these are things like this is the whole premise of books like Grady Hendrix's The Final Girl Support Group, right? Where it's, you know, like, but what happens next? So I liked the idea of lingering trauma. I liked thinking about these characters who have lived in a town, and why would they still live in that town? But they do anyway, where everything is haunted by their past trauma. And I also found it interesting to have it immediately proceed right after the previous film, so that, you know, the granddaughter can say, like, I'm so upset, my dad just died, but also I need to, like, I'm getting caught up in this moment. But But you're right that there are some problems with the articulation, particularly again when we have these two sort of contrasting threads. I do think though that the mob parts worked for me the best in terms of raising interesting questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the inevitable scene, where the other person from I can never figure out if it's a prison or just an institute, but the the
Lane,
person,
he
yes,
was from the institution with them.
And when they kill him, and of course it was so inevitable, but it was also still a very devastating scene.
Yeah.
I found that very interesting. I found that very interesting as a film that's coming out after some of the riots that we have been experiencing here in the U.S. I don't know when they wrote the script versus not, but it is hard to not think of the Capitol riots and things like that, and to think about like what is an acceptable form of being angry, and when do you have the right to say enough is enough, and when do you not have the right to, which is never, to kill innocent people, right, or to try attack people. Attack people. Period. So I found that thread of the narrative to be really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I did kind of like the very Beauty and the Beast, let's kill the beast scene where, the people have one person had an iron in their hand at one point.
Yeah.
I thought that was delightful, but I will say there were some tonal issues that I eventually need to get into that tied into the mob scenes. So.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the mob scenes I thought were really interesting because I thought that I didn't know I don't like where they ended up, I think. So I think I like a lot of the individual pieces of those scenes because you're right. I think those are the places in which the source of horror is most clearly articulated. I just don't think that they're ultimately able to then carry that through line of horror all the way through to the end because of how they ultimately are so willing to be disregarding the actual events that happen in this film because they're it doesn't matter. We have to reset. Michael has to escape. So none of this can really actually have that much effect on anything.
I was thinking about, because I like this film more than you. I don't like it as much as the 2018 film, and I don't think that I like it, and I definitely don't like it as much as the 78. But I didn't hate it with a passion untold like you did. But I've been trying to think about what is at the core my biggest issue. And surprisingly enough, it's not what is usually my biggest issue. So usually my biggest issue is that it feels like there is a grab bag of sources of horror. This film said, here's the source of horror. Horror is beyond, right? The boogeyman is supernatural. And they stuck with that from the beginning through the end. Did they always execute it well? No, but that was clearly their source of horror. In this film, my problem was that they didn't know what genre of horror they were trying to be. And some of that is that, and I felt this way, and we talked about this with 2018 as well, that, there are these moments of humor, which is a little unsurprising considering that Danny McBride is one of the people associated with these projects, which is so weird to me. But there's these humor, like the Big John, Little John, is set up to be this really campy, and it's almost delightful. It misses the mark a little bit in places, but it's almost there. But it doesn't work in a film that is also simultaneously trying to be a Silence of the Lambs, really deep horror, as well as it was trying to be every type of horror possible. A slasher, a thoughtful horror, what Jordan Peele calls the societal horror, and then also a horror comedy and sort of a campy horror, and you can't do all of that. You just can't.
I could not agree more. The film changes every single time it changes location. It's not scenes, it's locations, because it knows what it wants to do in a particular location. All of the scenes, which means it led to a very frustrating viewing experience for me. I really, really liked the way that this film, and I know, I just heard me say I liked something about it.
I'm so excited. I'm on bated breath.
I really, really did enjoy the way a lot of the kills in this movie. That's why you go to this. That's why you go to these movies. And you know what? They definitely deliver. Green sets up some really amazing kills. I love the one the scene where they like the woman had the gun, she turned it back on him.
We watched the film at home because we didn't have the strength to go to the theaters.
Yeah.
And I had gone like this to reach into a bag of chips, and I covered my eyes for that second. And my partner was like, "Oh my gosh, that was so cool!" And I was like, "It was just a second." So we had to rewind it, but yeah, it was such a delightful way to like show, again, to connect to that theme of like, perhaps we are our own biggest threat, right? And that, you know, maybe the danger is who has the gun, period, let alone whether they're good or bad. So yeah, there were some delightful, really great sort of practical effect style kills.
And so those were, they had a really good idea there, but anytime they would cut away from any scene that was not in that pathway to Michael's house, I thought that the film just totally, it was always trying to do something else.
Yes.
Whether it was the grounded, real approach to the boogeyman or this magic approach to the boogeyman, it was doing one of those two things in this other world that was not consistent with the, because I would say in the scenes that we see, he is real, like he is not magic Michael Myers that we see. He is just the same Michael Myers from like the 78 version where he's playing by the same set of rules that everyone else is. And that, which works, I think, but it's then when they try to not do that the film gets a little bit messy. And I think that interesting, as though I did like the kills themselves, I think that this film still weirdly has the same problem as the 78 film, and that it is every single person who dies. I mean, again, I may be just reading too much into this, but they are all, a lot of the victims are victims from historically marginalized groups and of people who are transgressive. So you've got the interracial couple, death. You've got gay people, death. You've got stoners, death. You've got delinquent kids, death. You've got an empowered female black doctor who shoots herself with her own gun. You've got a black emasculated man who dies because he won't get out to defend himself, or his partner. So I think a lot of these, like so again, this is an element that has been present in the Halloween film since the 78 version. This is really conservative view of a morality piece of like who is good, who this film franchise thinks is good, and who this film franchise thinks is bad.
Yes,
that is an element that I can't say came out of nowhere, because it certainly has been always a part of this franchise. But it is an element that I always dislike when I see it, because I just don't understand why this film keeps insisting that they are the bad people. And this one does it yet again. I will not. I don't think that I'm reading too much. I don't think I'm reading too much into this, because those are the victims that we have.
Yes.
I feel, which makes me feel a little bad, because I just said I liked seeing all of these kills because I like them in execution.
Yes.
I don't like who they're being executed on.
And I that is so really important, because it's not just who dies, although that's a very, very significant part of it. It's also who has the lines or the part of the dialogue that's intended to do some of these more transgressive, non-traditional slasher things, like the comedy, right? So I think about the interracial couple and how like she's really good at doing the like little drone, you know, and it's like a delightful little quirky element. But the problem is that you can't have your most interesting characters be your diverse characters that are then also going to die. And that was 100% how it is. So, you know, I realized that Laurie was injured for the majority of this film. And that's fair. But like, she's not a very developed or interesting character, which again, it's Jamie Lee Curtis. So we could have done so much with that. But you know, the daughter and the granddaughter also just not very interesting characters. And if we're gonna take Tommy, and we're already making a change in cast for the whatever reasons they did, to the delightful Anthony Michael Hall, who's been in stuff since he was a wee babe, right? Like 16 Candles, Breakfast Club. He's in all these things, so we know he can do different things. Why can't he be our gay character? Right? So if we can't have him be a non-white character, because again, Tommy was a character from the earlier, just like the nurse, just like the little girl, why can't that character also, why does he have to be like uber masculine? And I realize that there's a small way in which the film is like criticizing like that toxic masculinity of I'll solve the problem, little ladies, and the little ladies are like, dude, that's not Michael Myers. But it wasn't enough, right? Like it's not enough to to rectify what you were absolutely correct is just a really problematic element of this film that it's time to be better than that, right? It wasn't okay in 78, but that's what was happening in 78 in films. But in 2018, that really shouldn't have been happening. In 2021, there's just no way. It should not have been happening. And if that is the only way that you can build in diversity is with your canon fodder, there is a fundamental flaw in the narrative that can be fixed. It can be.
It really can. I think I had said this right before we started, is the frustrating part about talking about this film is I don't think that intrinsically all of this is bad. I think that there's a lot of really interesting stuff in this film. I think that particularly you could have done a really interesting horror articulation if you had just really committed to the mob mentality. That was really what you wanted to focus on. That's how you're going to build up the town around you and include those more diverse characters. That's what I thought. Anyway, that would have been really interesting to see. I thought that because the last, and I think that is what they were attempting to do. The last film was really focused on the family model,
yes.
And then this one they wanted to widen it out and bring in the rest of the community at Haddonfield. And I think that's a really good idea. Listen, I love Elm Street, and that's the entire thing that they do.
Absolutely.
Is the community level horror. The problem is that they didn't really figure out how to make the community level horror really feel like it was happening on the community, and as such, they would then just cut back into those individual houses on the way to Michael's house, which, by the way, cannot believe nobody figured that one out. Yeah. Michael Myers is doing the same thing he always does, going right back to his house. What? Yeah. Nobody.
There was a little bit of he keeps going back home, and they're like, well, let's keep hunting for him. Yeah, there was a really weird, where they acknowledged it, but then they still weren't using it that was definitely something that didn't quite make sense, didn't quite check. But like you said, I think what's so frustrating about this film, and why I can't just use the metaphor of being able to throw out the baby and the bathwater, is that there are these little things that show so much potential, and some of them are really tiny. One of the few moments where I felt the humor really succeeded was when those obnoxious kids were on the swings, and they were not going home, and they're like, there is a killer out here, and they're like, oh, you mean the gentleman that we've been playing hide and seek with? And you're like, who, if ever someone deserved to die, and so it was funny, but it again, like you said, I really think you hit the nail on the head when you said that the problem is that location by location, we have a brand new, it's almost like they said, okay, we're doing a Halloween film, but you get to take location X. What type of Halloween film do you want to make? A horror comedy, a social commentary, a traditional slasher? And they're like, fantastic. Okay, we're moving on to the next location. And then they just kind of tried to shove it together, and that didn't work.
No, unfortunately, it did not work. And I'm unsure. I mean, I know where the franchise is going from here. It's going onward and upward. We're getting another Halloween movie. Next year. Before
you talk more about it, there's one other thing I want to say about Halloween Kills, and that is that again, you and I are big fans of practical effects, and I think that, and we just need to acknowledge that in a film that could have just made Dr. Loomis be CGI'd or any number of things, or done, or also with some of the other flashbacks when they cast younger actors instead of doing that weird de-aging process on people that feels really uncanny. Yeah. But instead of having Dr. Loomis be CGI'd or anything like that, I just have to give a huge shout out to the film for saying, nope, we're doing practical effects because practical effects work. And it was who was the person that got to be? So
it's actually the film's art director.
That's so cool.
His name is Tommy Jones Jr., who was the physical body of Dr. Loomis in the film.
And I've seen the makeup, right, in the trailer, so you can kind of see it perfectly lighted, and it is beautiful. It is beautiful makeup, and beautiful prosthetics. So I think that's something that again is another reason why it's so hard to just be like, blech. I cast aside you film, because there are these moments that you're like, ooh, you did exactly what you should do.
Yeah.
Okay, but you said we are going upward, and what did you?
Onward,
Onward and upward. Thank you so much. What is next?
So next is Halloween Ends in 2022. So big claims, similar to Freddy's Dead, I guess, in terms of like this is supposed to be it. But obviously, Green talked about it in a separate article how it's more of like the end to his trilogy, and he knows that like they're Blumhouse, who now has. I guess I had forgotten that Blumhouse. Mini Blumhouse rant here. I had forgotten that Blumhouse owned the rights to Halloween until I
think I knew that either.
They had the little thing up on there, and their little logo thing, and I was because I was like weird. They had shown some like terrible trailer for one of their new horror movies in front of it in the theater that I went to, and I was like, what, really? A Blumhouse trailer got the last trailer before the movie starts? And then the thing went up, and I was like, we're watching. Oh, I didn't realize. This is a Blumhouse. We were inside the Blumhouse the whole time.
And we couldn't get out.
Maybe that was too mean to Blumhouse. Yeah, but they're bringing
one
back.
They have given us Get Out. They have given us some others. But also... a lot of the issues, I think, can be traced back to some of Blumhouse's strategies for making films. Okay, so Halloween Ends, which is the end of at least this version of the end.
So whereas the last two films basically took place on this like the same day in 2018, this one is doing a time jump. Okay. We're going 4 years into the future. And this is the description. Laurie Strode and Michael Myers will clash one last time 4 years after Michael's last massacre, where Haddonfield is still recovering from the horrifying night of 2018, the COVID-19 pandemic, and particular politics.
Oh, holy cow, that's a lot.
Oh my God. It is certainly a lot. That they are attempting in this one little description. Yeah. There is enough horror in here for like 4 or 5 movies.
I guess at least we can say they're being ambitious. They're not like letting it just kind of fade gently into the good night.
So I guess they're to put it like a prediction on like the way that they're trying to do. I guess the first one was individual home, like really really small micro family unit. Yes. The next one was a slightly larger community, and now with this one they're like society, America.
And we see that trend often in trilogies, right? That it's this is the Hunger Games scenario, right? Where we start really small and then it's like, well, now we have to have the games be a little bigger. Then it's like, nope, the games have to be even, right? We do this all the time. But that's a lot to pack into a film. I also am unsure. The final minutes of Halloween Kills, where Karen, the daughter, is killed, felt very odd to me. Again, there was another tonal shift, but I wasn't sure if we were supposed to treat that almost like a Nightmare on Elm Street style fake, right? Like, that this is a dreamlike moment, or if she's actually dead? Do you know?
Apparently that's not the real ending. That wasn't what Green originally talked about what the ending should have been. Now, Green also, in saying that this wasn't supposed to be the original ending, he did not say what it was. All he said was it'll be released on the Blu-ray. So I guess it was more of he included it to like make us buy the Blu-ray, which I don't know if I'll do. I may just watch because he teased the scene very much like he was like, you remember in Rogue One where at the end of the movie Darth Vader comes out and there's this big fan servicey moment where you like everyone, he's like, we'd filmed one of those. And that was supposed to be how the movie originally ended. I assume he doesn't mean with Darth Vader, but...
Although, we have another, like, godlike figure, so...
Maybe that's what the next one is. Michael Myers versus
that's what I want it to be.
Vader.
I want it to be reeling from the aftermath of the 2018 events, dealing with COVID, dealing with political events, ... and the Force. And then that's the film that needs to come out next. So I would love to hear people's responses. This film has really created a very polarized effect.
Oh my God.
Where people are like, I love this film, and people are like, how dare you speak of garbage in that way? And then people are like, garbage? What sort of horror person are you? And then there's the like people that are just sitting back with the popcorn and watching the dumpster fire, and they're like, this is fantastic, because it's neither terrible or awesome. It was just, so I would love to know your thoughts after listening to our thoughts. What caught your attention? Anthony, if they decide that they want to communicate with us, how do they do so?
Well, you can feel free to reach out to us using any of our social medias, which are linked in the description to this. Feel free to follow us on our YouTube page, all of our social media accounts. Leave us comments and ratings on wherever you get your podcasts from. That really helps us there. So if you just give us like a 5-star rating on iTunes, that would be amazing there. You can also email us if you have any comments that you want to get, which is also linked in here, so that you can either suggest a future episode or let us know maybe some comments that you maybe didn't want to share to the rest of social media, but you want us to just know and consider.
Yeah. And since this is our spooktacular episode, happy Halloween! Yay!
Happy Halloween!
Thank you so much for listening to our nightmares.
And have a spooktacular day.